Hi everybody, it's Andy and welcome again to my office in Modesto, California. I'm an attorney licensed to practice law in California as well as New York. In this video I'm going to go over a resource called the California Rules of Court that I don't think a lot of people, lawyers included probably, really know about. I see a lot of lay people, non-lawyers, doing their own case that are quite frequently actually tripped up by the rules of court. A lot of judges are fairly accommodating when non-lawyers are tripped up in this way. However, some judges aren't, or they can't be. So it is something that I think is unnecessarily, basically it's something that the average layperson really should not trip over, and hopefully this video kind of helps you out if you're in that situation. So the rules of court, I guess, can be best sort of envisioned like this. So the state of California or the state of Nevada, basically each state has specific laws about, say, criminal behavior, driving drunk, vehicle code, traffic laws, all that stuff. So all of those laws are going to be passed by the legislature of that particular state and signed into law by the governor, etc. If you remember back to your social studies class in elementary school, where you learned about how a bill becomes a law, typically that's at the federal level that they teach you that. They teach how Congress and the president work together. And that same process, however, occurs at the state level as well. So laws, as the average person kind of thinks of them, basically is stuff that is passed by the legislature. The rules of court, however, are slightly different. The rules of court are, they don't go over substantive stuff, but they do specify a lot of things that can possibly trip you up if you're not aware of them. So the biggest one that I usually encounter is basically appeal deadlines are actually specified in the rules of court also. I think it's Title 8 if I'm not mistaken. I have a big reference book that goes over that type of stuff. But there are things like appeal deadlines, there are things about what motions have to contain. If you are filing X type of document, the rules of court a lot of times will specify what has to be in it. And if you don't include all the stuff that is specified, the judge maybe is going to let that slide, but the thing is, sometimes here, the judge just can't. Because it's in the rules of court, but it's also required by other other authority. So, and then there's also kind of more minor stuff, I guess. So the thing is, it'll specify the font size that your document has to be in, the spacing, single, double, 1.5, etc. So there's a lot of housekeeping kind of aesthetic type stuff that is in the rules of court. But the thing is, the rules of court also contain more important things also. That will either trip you up one way or another. So basically, the rules of court are something that you really, if you are doing your own case, you really should be aware of. So the rules of court, I'm not going to actually go over all of it with you because it's humongous, but the rules of court are available online. Go to Google, some search engine, basically type in California Rules of Court, and search for the appropriate section that you're in, or or search for the appropriate section for the case that you have. There, that's the best way to say it. So, for example, if you have a probate case, there I think is a probate section for the rules of court. If you if you have a family law case, do that. If you have a civil case, look at those rules of court sections. Yeah, so the rules of court, it's another resource that you have to look up, but they are organized. It is organized fairly well once you kind of sit and kind of fiddle with it for a little bit. So. The rules of court, I guess you can think of as the state level rules about how to do things in court, aside from statutes, laws, cases decided by courts and stuff. I'm going to put out another video which I'll link over here, so if a bubble pops up that means I put it out. I'm going to link another video over here that goes over local rules also. So in my video about local forms versus state forms, I kind of explained that there were two different versions that you needed to worry about. For this video, I'm going over the rules of court. There's this parallel between state and local applies to rules as well as forms. So you have state and local forms as well as state and local rules. The state rules are going to be the rules of court. The local rules are going to be specific to each county and unfortunately are just called local rules. So I'm going to go ahead and put out another video, like I said, about local rules, and I'm going to go ahead and link over there. So go ahead and take a look at that if you're interested. So that's it, I guess. The local rule, I'm getting myself confused. The California Rules of Court oftentimes are abbreviated CRC and then a number followed by a dot and followed by a bunch more numbers. If you Google California Rules of Court, though, it comes right up. It is something that I think you should be familiar with if you're doing your own case, whether or not you're a lawyer or not. But it is something that, basically it's not complicated. Like, devote some time, read it over, familiarize yourself with it, and you should be okay. All right? Again, like I always say, hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but if it was, hopefully, you can rewind this video and go ahead and watch it again, and that helps you out some more. So until next time, I will wish you guys good luck. Thanks.